Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Jenny Dietrich.
And we're here today to give you an idea, but we're going to charge you for it. We won't give you an idea until you become a client of ours. No ideas, none at all.
I mean, I kind of agree with that.
Well, now
I know we don't agree on this, but
no, we don't agree on this. Well, I think like most things where you and I think we don't agree, and we start a show because of that, we're going to find that there's more common ground than we think as we go along.
maybe I'll just argue with you to argue with you.
You know, I mean, why not? It's 2020, so.
And you're tired today, so I could just
I am
keep
tired.
pinning,
I am burned out.
I don't know why. I mean, 2020's been such a joy. I can't imagine why anybody would be burned out.
Yeah. I just, part of it is I've had too many conversations recently where we've talked about the rest of 2020, and I am very, very pessimistic on where the rest of the year goes, but we'll save that topic for another.
Well, now I want to talk about that instead of ideas.
I don't think anybody really wants to hear my theories about Q4, though.
I would like to hear your theory so that I am better prepared, because this is what I learned during the Great Recession. All these economists were saying, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And I was like, oh, please, it can't be that bad. And then it was. So I would like to be prepared. So let's change our topic.
Well, this is a first. And I'm not sure.
And
I'm not sure it's a good idea.
Next week.
we will see if this episode actually ever airs, because it may be simply too depressing for me to have to listen to it over again to do the actual post production on it.
Have your summer associate's probably started school, hasn't he?
My summer associate starts school at the end of the month, but
okay.
He is mentally checked out already. So the last week or so I've had to pick up some of the slack, shall we say.
Got it.
For those of you who have not been listening, my summer associate is my son, who is headed off to college freshman year. I made him work for me this summer, so he was doing something productive, because his usual summertime activity is umpiring baseball, but he
couldn't do that this year.
Well, no, he could, but we decided that we weren't comfortable with him doing that.
Could he really?
Basis.
I didn't realize.
Oh, there's more baseball. I mean, there's more baseball in New Hampshire to umpire than any normal summer. I could be out umpiring every night if I wanted to. I could do 4 games every Saturday and every Sunday. It is an incredible amount. Unfortunately, it is It behaves much as summer baseball in other times, shall we say. But I don't want to get too far off on that track.
Okay. It's fascinating to me, the differences. I mean, we're still, certainly Chicago is quote unquote open, but we're still so not open, not normal, that it's like that stuff's not happening here. The parks aren't open, the playgrounds aren't open. You can't do that stuff here.
Well,
that's crazy.
It is such a different experience in different places. I mean, and it's difficult because in New Hampshire, I believe right now, if I heard the numbers correctly yesterday, I'm remembering it correctly, and who knows, it's 2020, and my memory's not good in 2019. So but I believe that there are only 12 people in the whole state hospitalized with COVID.
What?
Yeah. So it's very, very low, and so it does. I think that breeds a certain degree of complacency, and for someone like me who is more cautious, it makes it hard for me to argue that you need to be more cautious, because it's really not just generally spreading around where we are. The problem is that at some point, I believe it will, and by the time you realize it, it's too late, right? So it's one of those, it becomes very challenging, and. But yeah, so I mean, if you want to talk about outlook, I can talk about outlook. I think
I do. I would love to hear what you're thinking.
I think that Q4, so October 1 on, will be the most difficult period that any of us have ever seen, and I think it will be on 3 fronts. I think that the health situation, by all estimates, is likely to get worse in the fall. Right? I mean, all of these
for sure, I agree with that.
Typical pandemics have gone that way. I think you will likely see that there will be increasing numbers of infections and all that. Now, hopefully the treatments continue to get better, so that it's it's bad, but not as bad. But the numbers are just going to be so large that it's going to be, I think, scary. So you'll have that. I think that the economic assistance that's been in place has done its job of slowing down the economic damage. But that was all PPP and all of those things in the U.S. and similar programs in other countries were built on the notion that we were going to flatten the curve and then get back to normal in a few months.
Right.
That is clearly not happened.
Not happened.
It
Right.
clearly will not happen. There are large swaths of the economy that will remain heavily disrupted, I believe, through at least the end of next year, even if we have a vaccine. I do not think that large-scale business conferences will return until 2022 at the earliest.
I don't think so either. Yeah.
And the reason for that is because even if you get a vaccine in early 2020, which I think is optimistic, particularly getting it out to people, that's going to take time. But it's also going to take time for people's comfort levels to return. And then beyond that, people aren't going to start planning these large-scale events until you get to that comfort level because they've been burned once. A lot of people have lost a lot of money on events that they had planned to put on this year and can't. So they're going to be cautious in investing that money, knowing that the return may not be there for a while. So there's a lot of issues that will hold off those things around. So economic damage will continue. I think as this money runs out, I think you will see the unemployment numbers start to rise again.
Skyrocket. Yep.
As we're recording this, new numbers came out and they've ticked up for this particular week. So that there's already some signs that may be happening. We know that a lot of the airlines are planning to do large layoffs in the fall once their government aid runs out. They've already pre-announced it. So I think we're going to see more of that. So we're going to have health problems, we're going to have economic problems, and then here in the U.S., I think we're going to pile serious political problems on top of it. And this is not a political show, but we do have to look at politics, I think, in terms of what's the impact on business.
For sure.
And I think that there is an extreme likelihood that there will be a lot of uncertainty around the U.S. election results. I think that...
I don't know why you say that.
Well... Yeah. Well, obviously, we know that at high levels, the uncertainty is being promoted and encouraged. But the reality is that even if you didn't have that, the mechanics are such that it is unlikely that unless it is an extreme blowout in favor of Joe Biden, it is unlikely that we will know what the election results are on election night. Yeah. And I think an extreme blowout is incredibly unlikely. I don't believe that the split that there's enough momentum over there, and I still believe that there will be a lot of Trump support out there. So regardless of where you stand on this, whether you're a Trump or a Biden person, I think that it's certain that there will be uncertainty, and I think that that is likely to manifest itself in whoever loses questioning the integrity of the results. And I believe that will lead to a lot of very energetic arguments, shall we say, that have a high likelihood to deteriorate into violence like we saw earlier this year. Obviously different topics, but I think that regardless of the outcome, I think that is a likely scenario. And I think that what we're likely to see is Florida 2000 on a national scale.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Regardless of which side. So that means you're going to have a lot of angry people. You're going to have a lot of court cases in a lot of different places. And ultimately, there's a good chance that the Supreme Court or Congress ends up having to weigh in. I think it's just going to be a giant mess. And that will impact on the economy, because business doesn't like uncertainty at the big business, and so that then trickles down to all of us who are smaller than that. So I am very pessimistic about what the fourth quarter holds, and I think that it's going to be very damaging to the economy.
Well, they have been saying all along exactly that there's going to be economic fallout around October 1st. They've been saying all along that there's going to be a second wave, that we don't know what to expect when it gets cold outside and people can't be outside. And, restaurants here are open outdoors, but not indoors. So what does that what happens there? They've been saying this all along. So we have to be prepared for those kinds of things. And certainly it's depressing. And I think, we all have a tendency to be like, I don't want to think about this. I don't want to think about this. Let's just wait and see. But at the same time, we have to be smart as business leaders and figure out what that looks like. And where. I mean, one of the things you've been saying is plan. So what does the plan look like?
I mean, it's very difficult because there is baked into this a lot of uncertainty, right? That's what I've just said. So planning amidst uncertainty is challenging. I think what you have to do is you have to plan for the maximum amount of flexibility possible. And so you need to be focused on arranging your agency in such a way that you can be elastic to what the needs of your clients are, elastic to what the economic reality of your own agency may be. And so I think really, building as much flexibility into your model as you go forward is going to be incredibly important. But I think that I'm increasingly convinced that your timeline for building that flexibility in is a lot shorter than I might have thought a month or so ago. I think that it's becoming increasingly clear that you're going to have the confluence of three events all simultaneously, the health, the economic, and the political all coming together at just the wrong time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're wrong. I really don't. I wish I did, but I completely agree. One of the things that we've been doing that is actually working pretty well is all of the clients that put us on hold at the end of March and early April, we've gone back to. And with the exception of one, everybody's been like, I need your help so much, but I can't do a retainer like they had before. And the funny thing is they're actually ending up paying us more than if they had us on retainer. But they have this feeling of, because it's not a retainer, that it's more project-based, that they have more flexibility, and we're providing them that flexibility. So for instance, we have one client who was paying us $12,000 a month as a retainer, and then he put us on hold at the beginning of April, and now he's paying $15,000 and has for the last 2 months and probably will for the next 2. So it's ending up costing him more money from a month-to-month standpoint, but it's providing him the flexibility to not freak out and have to say, okay, we've got to put this on pause again. So it's just a month-to-month kind of thing. So I think from a flexibility standpoint, doing those kinds of things and save as much cash as you can, because cash is going to be definitely king right now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, and I don't, as listeners know, I always believe that there are opportunities in these sorts of situations.
For sure.
So just as you identified that project work can actually be more lucrative, at least in the near term, that's something that agencies should be looking at and trying to figure out, how, and we've talked about this, how do you de-risk things for clients? And that largely means going to shorter, more focused projects. And so that's likely what you're, going to be selling in Q4. But if you have clients, if you're in spaces that are likely to be impacted by any of the three factors that I've talked about, you need to really start thinking now about how you're going to address it. So I work with some public affairs firms to help them on their businesses. And so, one of the things that we've talked about is making sure that they're not guiding their clients to do quote unquote normal activity in November, December. So for example, don't plan on putting virtual events on that are public policy related in that time frame that you're investing a lot in right now, because the environment is going to be so bizarre that it may not work, right? And historically, I mean, I come from the world of politics, as some folks know, and it was very common for us in the public affairs space to put on events in November, December that were public policy focused and sort of looking ahead to the next administration, regardless of which one it was, and you would invest and plan on those in advance. I think that's very difficult to do right now, because you could very much end up landing in a spot where no one cares, right? Because if this is Florida 2000 on a national level, then all of the political and public policy brainpower is going to be sucked into that and focused on that. But even if that's not there, I think there's going to be so much uncertainty that you may end up, having a topic or panelists or attendees, or, virtual attendees that are not the right fit. And so, I think that you need to be building that flexibility in and thinking about that. And certainly if you're in the healthcare space, you're probably already thinking about this, because I think it's been widely talked about that there will be a resurgence. So I'd be shocked if you were in healthcare, PR, or marketing and didn't already have this on your radar. But I think that economic piece is something else to think about, because as the government assistance runs out, unless there is some new wave of it, and obviously, we know the level of dysfunction in the U.S. right now when it comes to this. Again, it doesn't matter which side you're on, there's dysfunction.
Right. Yes.
And so the probability of substantial economic aid coming through is low, and if it does, it may be some bizarre kind of thing that's designed to thread the political needle, which then may not be all that useful.
Right.
Just talking reality, folks. So,
right.
So if you are dealing with industries that need that kind of help going forward, or will be impacted if the economy, takes a right turn into the wrong place, then that's something that you need to be planning for as well.
Yeah, and I also think even if you're working in industries that have and are going to continue to explode, like food. I have a really, one of my very best friends works for a very large, not to be named dog food company. And he tells me all the time, they can't keep up with demand. They just can't do it because everything's been interrupted from a supply chain perspective. And it's just, it's nuts. So all of this stuff, even if, even if it's, I guess what we would call an essential business, that all of that has been interrupted because of everything. And it's a global pandemic. It's not a U.S. pandemic. So all of it's been interrupted, and that's going to affect as this trickles down as well, because there's just no way that they can keep going the way that they are.
Right. Well, and I think that, the other thing is it's important that, as we've talked about before, it's important to develop your own perspectives. And so just as, this is my perspective on things, you need to spend the time looking at your ideal clients and thinking about what is your perspective. What do you think is going to happen? And I know that a lot of us would rather not think about some of this, right? I mean, I know that it is very fatiguing to be thinking about these things.
Yes.
Trust me.
Yes.
But if you're not looking at it, then it's hard for you to figure out what to offer your clients and how you might need to be of assistance to them if some of this comes to pass, or if whatever you think is going to come to pass comes to pass. So you need to stake that ground out.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. And the best, hope is not a strategy, right? And plan, just like we do in crisis communications, you plan for the worst and you wait to see what happens. It's probably not going to be as bad as you have planned in your mind. It's going to be bad. I agree with you. I don't think it's optimistic by any stretch of the imagination. And, people keep saying, well, when the kids go back to school in November, and I'm like, yeah, it's not happening. But, everybody has this sort of rosy, optimistic glow that, I don't know, we're going to get through this first quarter of school and do it virtually, and then all of a sudden we're going to go back in person. It's just not going to happen. So plan for the worst and be pleasantly surprised if it's not as bad as you would think.
Yeah, I would love that. But yes, contingency planning is something you really need to think about, and that's something that we're also seeing right now. Speaking of schools, there are a lot of schools, particularly colleges and universities, that have started going back, and it's been like, whoops, that's not working. We're going to need to try. Who would think that college kids would not socially distance from
or
themselves,
not have parties, or
right. That's not what college kids do.
Correct. No.
It's been a while since I was a college kid, but I do remember I was not the best rule follower at the time, and I was one of the better rule followers in my group. So
as was I, but still.
But fortunately, the statute of limitations is run on all of that stuff, so it's all good. It's all good. But so you need to have sort of a plan A, B, and C, I think.
Yeah.
Particularly for that period of time. So we've talked recently about the importance for long-term planning, and obviously the longer out you get, the less productive it is to have real contingencies. But the fourth quarter is not that far away. We're midway through the third quarter right now.
Right.
So you do need to be thinking about what are your contingency plans for some of these scenarios that may happen, or perhaps others that you outline based on your own knowledge and research, because obviously, we all only know what we know, and so our perspectives are based on our own personal experiences as well as whatever information we've been able to collect.
Sure.
So I would encourage you, collect as much information as you can. Try to digest it, even though it's uncomfortable, and try to figure out, what are your contingencies if some of the more likely scenarios happen, and maybe even if some of the unlikely ones occur too.
Right. I mean, it's crisis communications planning 101. That's do it as if you're helping your clients plan for a crisis, and have your different priorities 1 through 5.
Yep.
If this happens, we do this. If this happens, we do that. Like, you just plan it out and put it on paper. It makes it less emotional that way. And you can say, okay, we've hit priority 3, so we have to do this, this, and this. And it sucks, but you've all agreed that that's what you're going to do.
Right. And the only other thing I would add is, plan for the contingency in the near term, but don't overreact to what it means in the long term, right? So I know a lot of agencies are talking about, we're never going to have an office again. I think it's premature to start making statements like that. I think that some people are saying the same about education, right? We could just go all online. Why even have school buildings and that kind of stuff? Doesn't make any sense. We could just do it online. And the reality, no, it's not. And it's just as we've talked about here. Remote work isn't the same for all individuals and all businesses, and so there's going to be a continued mix. Obviously, there are going to be challenges you need to address in the short term, but don't take the idea of contingency planning to the extreme and just, go radical and say this is all changed forever, and I've just,
and we're
we're done, right? It is tough. You have to find that balance amidst all of this, and try to figure out how you build that flexibility in for the short term as well as positioning yourself for the long term.
Well, I will say that yesterday, Cranes, which is the business journal here, reported that WeWork has backed out of 2 leases that they were going to do in the Fulton Market, the West Loop, which is like the hip, new, trendy place to be, and they've backed out of that. So those are the kinds of things that you want to be paying attention to, especially in your cities. That's huge. That's going to affect, whether or not you go back to work in an office, and that's a big trendsetter. So look at those kinds of things. What's happening in your city? What's happening to other businesses? To your point earlier, if the airlines are going to be laying off, what does that mean for travel, for, and seeing clients and all those kinds of things? Those are the big triggers that you should be paying attention to help you figure out what the next 4 or 5, maybe even 6 months looks like.
Yep. Absolutely. Not pleasant to think about, but
no, it's not. But I think it's important. You have to, and it's not. I mean, I know I keep saying this, but it is crisis communications planning, and it is looking at every possible scenario. What happens if we do this, and what happens if this happens? And you can do everything from natural disasters and executives passing away unexpectedly to shootings and social justice movements. I mean, you can plan for all of those things. And then there's going to be a bucket over here that is the unknown, stuff that you can't predict. You can't predict that there's going to be a global pandemic.
Right.
You can't predict that. You couldn't have before now. Have a bucket of unknowns as well.
You could. Some people did, but yes.
Some did, yeah. Right. We couldn't have predicted the lack of response. But that's as political as I'll get.
And I'm going to behave myself even more. So,
but I do think it is depressing. But I think it's really important for you to be thinking about those things, thinking about it from a local perspective, a regional perspective, and a national perspective. And I'm even thinking international because I have 2 clients who are overseas. And what does that look like? So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
The international and the international component, even if you're not directly tied to international, as you mentioned before, supply chains and customers and all that, there are international components that will absolutely have an impact. And so that is something to keep an eye on. And I think, generally as Americans, we do a pretty poor job of paying attention to the rest of the world.
We do.
So one of the things that I try to do is, once a week, I try to watch the BBC instead of, CNN or something like that, just because I know it will give me a different perspective. It's also because I've spent a lot of time over in the UK and I just enjoy watching the BBC. It is an odd news network. I mean, sometimes you sit there and you scratch your head and you say, how is this the third story of the day? Just editorial judgment is just a little bonkers at times over there.
That's funny.
But in any case, so you do need to try to find ways to expand your horizon, particularly to the international component, because that is absolutely going to have an impact, potentially even in places where it's not immediately obvious. So this again goes back to the importance of really becoming an expert in the types of ideal clients that you serve and what are the challenges that they are facing now and likely to face based on whatever outlook you want to take on the fourth quarter and beyond.
And I would say continue to have conversations with your clients at an executive level. We have one client that I talk to the CEO probably twice a week, and then he texts me nonstop. But I said to him, they're actually having a really hard time hiring people right now. They have 150 jobs open, which is insane. And so I said, can I talk to your director of HR? And I got a completely different, it was the same message, but it's a completely different story from her on what things are happening, what's working, what's not. And, being able to understand more fully what they're really facing with all these jobs open that they can't fill. So have conversations with your day-to-day contact, of course, but also different people on the executive team, because you're going to get different types of information that will help you make these kinds of decisions for your own business.
And great advice. The other people that you need to be having conversations with are your peers, other agency owners.
Yes.
And it boggles my mind how reluctant agency owners are to speak with each other. They view other agencies as the enemy.
They do. It's
Listen
crazy.
to me.
Yeah.
Other agencies are not the enemy. Okay?
No.
You can learn a lot. There are a lot of beneficial arrangements that you can have. Even if you sit there and this is an agency maybe that you run up against regularly in pitches, still talk to them.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, there are, it's like those of us who advise agencies. Ginny and I both advise agencies. We do a show together. Right? I have plenty of people on my other shows that also advise agencies. If you're an agency owner, talk to other agency owners. You'll learn so much. You'll build your perspective. Who knows? Maybe it'll lead to some potential partnerships down the road. So you have to gather as much information as you can at all times, but particularly now. And one of the best places to get it will be other agency owners. And you can't be afraid of it. You can't see them as the enemy. That it's a zero-sum game. It's not. There are plenty of opportunities out there, even in this environment. And so.
Absolutely.
Open up your blinders and expand your knowledge base.
Well, I do agree that it's depressing to think about these things, but it's really, really important. So thank you for changing topics at the last minute.
I'm always happy to talk about just about anything. So, you just point me in a direction and I've got an opinion. It may or may not be a well-informed opinion, but it'll certainly be an opinion.
Well, I think this one in particular is very well informed, and I agree with you. I mean, unfortunately, but that's where we are.
Well, with that, we will end the doom and gloom episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Ginny Dietrich.
And it depends.